Hey, everybody. You all should be able to unmute. Thank you for joining the Q&A. This is our very first one. So I guess I'll say that, welcome to the Baseline Protocol Q&A session weekly. Our intention is to do these weekly. We may modulate the time. So I'll say welcome. Oops, and maybe Baseline Protocol. I will modulate the time. I'll say welcome. Turn off my, yep. So hopefully now I am not, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, John.
Okay. I'll put this in the chat. This is where the YouTube stream is running. And I will minimize that so I'm not looking at myself over lag. But yeah, now so we have the ability to stream, sign people up, and I'm just going to see. Does anybody have? Put in chat if you can't unmute yourself. We're really debugging. This is the very first time we've used our webinars capability. Would somebody, Noam, you want to unmute if you can?
It works, I think.
Oh, very well. Very good. And Sam, can you are you able to turn your video on? You don't have to, but I want to know if you can.
Yeah, let me try. Yep.
Okay, good. Then I set the settings up correctly. So this is a Q&A session, and so I'm here with Sam. Sam Stokes is one of the people, one of the engineers who made the Baseline Protocol happen and worked on Radish 34 since the beginning with Ernst & Young and Microsoft and all the others. So Sam, say hi.
Hey.
And I'm John Wolpert. I was also on the team since the beginning. And this is our first weekly Q&A. Things we can talk about are how to get involved with the Baseline community generally. Are you having any trouble getting into any of the community stuff? Are you having trouble knowing what to do in there? Would you like to do more, but you're unclear how? So those are the kinds of things we can talk about with regard to sort of the meta level of this, but we can also talk about technical questions. That's why Sam is here, and I can go to a certain depth myself. So we can talk about technical issues. We can talk about deployment. We can talk about anything you like. At this point, it is my experience that the best way to get people talking is for me to create an uncomfortable silence. So I will stop talking in 3, 2, 1.
And maybe I can kick it off, John. So I'm currently leading the sales engineering practice for Marco Polo Network in EMEA. So that you know very well that is based on Corda. So I was just interested in knowing, of course, I applaud all the initiative around Baseline, and it looks to me like it makes a lot of sense. I was wondering, aside from the technical progress around the protocol itself, do you guys have any roadmap in terms of like the supporting business applications that will eventually use the Baseline protocol from an vertical perspective, industry vertical perspective?
Yes, that's a great question. Thanks. Artiona, correct?
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, say hi to our friends over in Corda. We're all in this together, right? So we're all trying to make stuff better. I have great respect for the Corda team myself, and I think Richard Brown and I go kind of knock each other about on Twitter, but it's kind of fun.
We've noticed, yeah.
Yeah. If anybody says that we called each other and secretly arranged to create fake fights between us, I will deny it. But anyway, yeah. Even when we disagree, which we do from time to time. I really like, he's one of my favorite people. Anyway, so Corda. So in terms of the roadmap, if you go into the baseline protocol GitHub repo, and it's in particular, if you have ZenHub extension enabled, or if you go to the ZenHub web app, you'll see the roadmap, which is getting situated pretty well. I think by next week we will have all the key initiatives, and then anybody that wants to join the SSE and add an initiative can do so. Specifically, I think to your question, the question is what kind of supporting technology, or what kind of integrations? Would that be a fair way of asking? So right now there's, yeah.
I am more interested in like, I'm not, I don't think it's yet time for interoperability between Corda related applications and those that will thrive on baseline. So I'm just interested in knowing any full-fledged business applications that you guys are developing on top of baseline, of course, with close feedback that you might receiving from industry partners. I just want to know, like, what is the the meat around the backbone that you are developing, and are you planning to first finish the technical specifications, maybe run a couple of tests for 1 or 2 use cases, and then fully grow into like standalone applications that will be supported by industry? What's the plan there? How does it look? If you can of course disclose any of the insights.
Well, good clarification. Thank you. The answer is simply, let me start by saying baseline protocol is not a platform. It is not a chain. It's not a product. It never will be. It's not a token. It's not a scheme. It's, I say this a lot. And I think because it's got a good name, baselining it's just a well-chosen name. By the way, Sam and I worked on Sam came up with a design pattern for doing this that early on, and we're like, what do we call this thing? What do we call doing, entanglement, blah, blah, blah. And one day it kind of two or 3 weeks later, baselining, we should call this baselining.
Yeah,
so,
you should save this for a blog post. You should save
sorry?
the story. You should save the story for a blog post.
Yes, right on. So baseline is not something that, like Corda is a platform. Baseline is not. So when we talk about integration, baseline is entirely a cookbook for integrations. That's what it is, right? Sam, you want to say anything about that? So SAP, Oracle, Corda, Fabric, any state machine that needs to have a verifiable consistency between it and another state machine can use the baseline approach as a way to do it.
Sorry, John. I think there was a little there was a little bit of confusion also with what Paul Brody and the EY Blockchain Summit actually. So I think the confusion came because by now I think most of the people that have been following the happenings around baseline also associated with the capability to perform in a way transactions which are private from enterprise to enterprise, leveraging the mainnet. But I understand the idea around the common frame of reference that baseline brings. Yeah, that's clear. Yeah, and I'm just browsing through the GitHub, but I don't see the roadmap.
Do you see the ZenHub tab in the middle of if you don't have ZenHub extension enabled, you won't see it.
Oh yeah, I do see that. Yeah.
If you see it, Sam, if you can take it from here, I'll pull up the ZenHub web app and paste that in. Do you want to say a few words about the way we integrate or what baselining is doing?
Sure. I think the goal of building the protocol right now is to make it generalized such that it's applicable to a bunch of different use cases. So I guess we're trying to build that foundation, and then make it modular enough where people can plug in their own specific modifications as they'd like. For example, the Socrates circuits would be one thing that would probably be well suited to being, I guess, people creating their own, building their own circuits that specifically apply to their use case and enforce their business logic. For example, in Radish, you see the Socrates circuits that were built were specific for supply chain steps. So, you know, they enforce the business rules of basically the different states you go through in a supply chain, where a buyer sends out a request for a proposal, and then the next state would be a supplier responding with a proposal, and then them agreeing to a master service agreement. And at that point, you know, the Socrates circuit enforces that we get signatures from both parties, and that commitment is pushed on chain. So we're trying to build the foundation that would support any sort of Socrates circuit, and kind of build the very fundamental states that could fit to most use cases, and then kind of leave it open for people to plug in their own specific circuits, or you know, that apply to their use case.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. And I see there's more participants, so I should probably unmute some of them. And I will, before I do that, I'll put this in chat before I forget. Chat. There it is. There's the ZenHub roadmap, the web app version. And anybody can get right access to that by joining the SSC. So anybody that wants to take accountability for a piece of work. Yeah, in the next week or so, you'll see that this roadmap will be filling up with quite a bit of stuff. And I'll promote more folks to panelists. I am loving webinars. There you go. Hey, everybody. I see there's one question in the Q&A. So if baseline just hardens the data integrity around a central source of truth, like an ERP, how does it differ from writing to any other DLT? Well, I think, you know, as I understand it, there's already a couple of folks. I mean, it's starting to get hard to track everything that's going on around baselining. We're tracking an SAP and Dynamics, where you're using the baseline pattern to show how to connect SAP and Dynamics in a baseline sort of way. I would say that, you know, the pattern itself, because again, it's a cookbook, it doesn't care if it's using the mainnet that, you know, I talk about the mainnet, the capital M mainnet. And yeah, I'm a partisan of thinking that Ethereum is a pretty good candidate for that mainnet. But I say mainnet, and I think a lot of folks are starting to say that to define the job before we decide the candidates for the job. Or, you know, so we can say, this is what the job of being a mainnet is. And here are the candidates that various people will think it, you know, ought to do that job. I think when people realize how boring and low level that job is, I think a lot of people will stop being interested in doing that job, and there will be only a few left. And you really don't want more than one doing that particular job, just like you don't want more than one TCP/IP. So the mainnet is lower level than, say, Corda or Fabric or any of these other technologies. And which mainnet we use? Well, I like Ethereum, I like ETH2, but you don't have to, and the future is not written on that yet. Any common frame of reference can do. You can set up a traditional database in the baseline pattern and it would work. You can use any blockchain and it would work. Sam, keep me honest on this. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I see Matthew Wolf raised his hand. Did you have a question, Matthew?
Yeah, I did. I actually had asked that question. I just think I forgot to tag myself to it. I just had a quick follow on. So just to give a little context, I work for a firm called RSM. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not.
Good to have you. Thanks.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it's good to have you guys here.
Yeah. No, interested. So, as you know, or may not know, we're probably the largest implementer of Dynamics in the entire world. We work closely with Microsoft. So I sit on a team at RSM that oversees blockchain and digital assets from a national and international perspective. One of the things that we obviously are very deep on already and working actively on is, it's essentially a plugin for ERPs, right? For Dynamics or NetSuite or anything that we work on, because those are the central source of truth for our customers. And that's not going to change for the future, because a lot of that reporting of the tax and the audit and things like that comes from those ERP systems. So we view blockchain as a way to harden the integrity of that data. And so
Exactly right.
Right. So when I saw you guys starting to deploy blockchain, it fell in line with a number of asymmetric places that we would potentially output certain aspects of that data or metadata of that data that isn't necessarily proprietary or business sensitive data to a public, private, semi-private, whatever chain. So that's why my question was, how should we be thinking about it as a place to output data to, from, let's say, a plugin that we built that pulls from Dynamics, some sort of data that we want to harden the integrity of, and then we were going to stamp it in our mind to private Ethereum, Hyperledger, like sometimes we do with Trade Lens or something of that nature. But now we have Baseline in the mix, and obviously EY, Microsoft, they're all part of our ecosystem. So curious about that.
So this is great. First of all, the pattern of what we call anchoring or proof of work, or proof of existence sometimes is what it's called. There's a company called Tyrion that's been doing it for years.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah. I very much respect their CEO. Has been a friend for a while. I think that so the difference here is that there's integrity. There's maintaining the integrity. I mean, you could state hash and put that in the New York Times classified section, which actually has been done, right? This is proof of entanglement or proof of consistency, right? So you have your record in Dynamics. We are now, you and I are doing a PO, right? Yeah, and I'm on SAP. And so my procurement system is on SAP, yours is on Dynamics. By the way, we're just talking about the Dynamics team yesterday. It was a fantastic call. They were incredibly supportive, and they're helping out in really great ways to make a particular demo happen. And we're very grateful to them for that, as is SAP and Unibright and other companies. So with this, again, there's no new product or platform in the middle. There's just a design pattern that we call baselining that says you have a record in Dynamics, you're going to serialize it and send it to me in SAP, normal messaging protocol, peer-to-peer, point-to-point. And then we're defining the specification for what that needs to be. So you can't just use any, to be baseline compliant, you might say. You wouldn't use just any messaging protocol. It's got to be GDPR compliant, et cetera, et cetera. Right. We've been talking a lot to the NATS people about that. So that's one potential way of going about that. We implemented the first demo in Whisper, which is exactly not right. Right. So, and in fact, we did it that way to say, this is what you could do, but it's not, we just need messaging here. So you're going to get that message to the SAP system. The SAP system's going to sign it. And then we go through a process whereby that baseline proof is rendered under zero knowledge onto the mainnet. And yeah, at that point, you could set up a not mainnet, a non-public blockchain to receive that in the same way that the mainnet's doing it. But you got to ask yourself, have I just created yet another silo, right? Whereas, if we're right about baseline as a pattern that allows you to use a blockchain in such a way that nobody looking at the blockchain would know that anything's happening, at all. So you're under complete stealthiness. Then you have to ask, why wouldn't I just use the thing that's always on and running and can't lock me out for that, right? It's just middleware. It's not like I'm putting data there. I'm not putting business data there. And that's the job. The specification will be heavily around making sure that we don't mistakenly create any kind of specification where sensitive business information coming from the company running Dynamics is exposed in any way, including things like Poisson distribution analysis of event tracking, right? Saying, oh, well, I don't know who you are. I don't know what's going on, but I can see the pattern here. I'm going to make you, and with, you know, a year of AI analysis on this data, right? You know, the job of baselining is to say, no, we're using the mainnet in such a way that you don't have to worry about it as a CISO. You're not giving up your position, your relationships, or your business activities to anyone. You're just using a public network the same way you're using the public internet to do some very low level things. Sam, you have any thoughts on
that? Yeah, that sounded right. So yeah, to John's point, just to emphasize, one of the things he said was, you know, why would you use Ethereum over other distributed ledgers? Yeah, our reasoning was Ethereum, and it doesn't have to be Ethereum. It can be others, but that's one of the most readily available.
Well, no, we'd use Ethereum. We'd use a mix, right? We'd use a bunch of asymmetric networks. So we'd use public Ethereum, private Ethereum, Hyperledger, because we're writing to a bunch of different places for a bunch of different reasons, right? And depending on the frequency of those writes and transactions and reads, that, you know, certain things don't make sense where other things make sense because of cost and things like that.
Right, gotcha.
May I ask a follow-up question to John's example with the PO? I just want to better understand what the middleware does, as opposed to standard integration protocols, SDKs, which are already out there. So let's say that
go ahead.
Let's say that a PO was created out of an ERP system that is intercepted through the baseline protocol. Would that create, so to say, some event listener on the receiving SAP system so that it kind of accepts that PO and automatically creates like an invoice? I'm just creating a very simplified version here, but so the supplier would first need to approve the PO, and then they would create, they would have like an invoice on their respective ERP system. So is this now done and achieved through this middleware, so that essentially it kind of listens from, it listens like events happening in the ERP, and then it, on a bilateral basis, it then instructs the receiving party to create the object on their side, and then it goes and notarizes what happened on the mainnet. Is this more or less like a good summary of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, you've got it. Sam, you worked on the messaging part, but the only thing is, it's not that there's a baseline middleware. It's just that the pattern says, yeah, use messaging, and what you just described is messaging and EDDSA done in a certain order, right? So the protocol is saying this is the order, and these are the rules you should follow to make sure that you're doing this securely. But if you use messaging protocol A or B, that's up to your implementation, right? As long as, and where we would suggest that the mainnet is important is to say, well, you want to have one common frame of reference, and wouldn't it be nice, as long as you're not getting, you're not revealing anything about your business activities, wouldn't it be nice if that was something that is no longer a silo? Everybody's just using it. It's always there. It's always on. You pay as you go.
So
Sam,
was this a standardization?
Yeah.
I mean, are you setting standards and saying this is what we think the payload should be, so that you can write across, and we can say, so that we can, I mean, interchain would be a terrible word here, because we're really talking about inner ERP, right? Using a standardization model. Is that sort of, am I closer there?
It's an ESB for state machines. And so the real competitor, maybe it's not really competitor, but a better, more apt competitor to this idea or to the mainnet is not Corda or Fabric. It's MQ.
Right.
Okay. Even then, you're going to still want to use MQ series, right? But this would allow you to have an ESB where you're not, where your dynamic system isn't just telling you what you know, but it's also on a record by record basis with atomic compartmentalization, so that counterparties only know that one record of activity or that one bit of a workflow. So think about supply chain, where you might have a party in the workflow that shouldn't know about step 2 at all, shouldn't even know it exists, right? Say your shipper is also a competitor. Not like that ever happens in the world today, right? You know, it would be nice to be able to grab their delivery date for your invoice process without them actually knowing who you are or that you're doing anything with a particular buyer, right? But you need to have a common frame of reference to do that.
All of our customers are suppliers. All of our customers supply into Walmart, right, or places like that. And so, yes, okay, I understand.
The more the world's about co-opetition, and the more BPM is about cross-company and multi-company business process automation, and our enterprise systems of record need to be more about what all of us know, not just what one of us, not what we know. The more a baseline protocol becomes important, unless you are okay with putting all of your internal data on a new threat surface called a blockchain, right? Private or public. And I don't think anybody, any CISO that I know is not thinking that's a terribly good idea for sensitive data, given that even a private blockchain is a digital nudist colony. It's just on a private beach.
Yeah, I feel like this might work well in shipping and receiving from like a major port. Because you have a lot of people that need to know things in various stages of quarantine and things like that.
Yeah, and I think I had a hand in this. I'm sorry to say, but because I was there in 2015 when we all got excited about private blockchains, and built one of the bigger ones. But at the time, we were thinking that we would be able to create these consortia more quickly and easily if we could say, hey, all of us have control, but none of us is in control of the system through which we're doing business. I wrote that line. And I think I was a little bit wrong, because it turns out it takes just as long to forge these damn things, and they're still just as hard to forge these alliances. I've been doing alliances for 30 years. It takes 18 to 24 months. It still takes 18 to 24 months. And now we have to teach people blockchain, right? And what we basically said to them was, and Corda, by the way, I have to give props, is the best at this particular problem, because it's so finely grained. It's basically not a blockchain, it's a message. It's a messaging protocol. And I think when you think of it, Corda in that way, Corda flows, it's really well designed. I just don't know that I would call it a blockchain. You basically have a what we basically said in the beginning was, in order to solve this problem of transparency, let's put it all on a single source of truth. And that phrase was the mistake. What we want is a common frame of reference so that we know that all of our respective databases are in a state of consistency on an atomic basis. What we didn't need and don't want, when you think it through, is a single source of truth where everybody in a business line has admin access to the root repository of the information. Because that means your stupidest admin is going to make you all, right? When they get hacked by Mr. Robot. Is that what do any of us really want that? I don't think so, right? So don't put anything on a common frame of on a single source of truth that is maintained by hundreds or tens or even 20s, small or large number of companies, unless you're really confident in every single admin's ability not to get hacked.
Yep.
So we said, let's make that problem irrelevant. Let's not use it for that. Let's use it as middleware so that we're really tolerant of it getting hacked, because we don't really care. There's nothing on it. We're getting to the, we actually have hit the bottom of the hour. And we're going to keep these short, but we're going to do them often. So we'll do them every week. Is there, I'll leave this open for a couple of minutes for any last questions. Any comments about things you'd like to discuss in the future? And obviously, it's pretty easy to get into the Slack and make suggestions about what we should be talking about on these. Does anybody have any last questions?
Yes, this is Boris. I think this was very helpful. And I'm a technical business analyst, and spent like worked on quite a few projects with E&Y in the past, regulatory, specifically in the finance industry. So I have been kind of like getting into Ethereum for about a year, and this is, I think, baseline from what I've seen. Like the webinar you had, I couldn't join it, but I was listening to it. It looks to me like something at I guess at a conceptual level at this point. I don't fully understand the details, but the conceptual level sounds really great. I mean, it's something that could be very beneficial, since blockchain is a, as we all know, it's a pretty complicated beast from a technical and business perspective also. But so I would like to definitely, I do have questions. It just, I'm kind of in the middle of my workday, so but it is very helpful, and I hope you can continue this in the next in the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Boris. And if if you go to baseline-protocol.org, you'll see the inviter to the Slack and.
Yeah, I joined the Slack I think last week. So
terrific. So feel free, anybody on the call, to continue to ask questions. I've not seen such an active Slack community. I've been looking at the analytics. All of our analytics across the board have just been going up and to the right. It's crazy. We're just kind of every day breaking our little corner of the internet. So let's everybody keep it up. There will be some pretty exciting announcements in the next few weeks, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you, everybody, for your time. We'll be here. That's our time. We'll be here all week. We'll be here next week. Artiona, thank you for your questions. Those were great. Please say hi to our friends.
Will do.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm coming from SAP's blockchain team, so I'm not sure if you're in touch with the right people, because they were working on a similar concept some time ago. I can make an intro.
Then I'd be grateful for that if you ping me on Slack or something, and we can. I used to be involved with the SAP team back at IBM a lot, and it's a big company just like IBM was or is, and so there's lots of people to be involved.
Yeah, I will connect you with the head of blockchain at SAP.
Oh yeah, of course. Thanks. Okay. All right, cheers, everybody. I know.
Bye-bye.
Hi, John. Hi, Sam. John, thank you so much. Very helpful.
Thanks, man. Thanks for being here.
Cheers. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
See you, Sam. Thanks again.
Yeah, see you.